I actually play a little parlor game sometimes if I have the Quran and I'm with somebody who says, oh, you're misinterpreting, you're taking it out of context, you're ignoring all the peaceful passages. I say, okay, open it up any place, anywhere, open it up at any passage, any page that you open it to, you will find a furious denunciation of unbelievers. Fight against those who do not obey Allah and do not believe in Allah or the last day, and do not forbid what has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, even if they are of the people of the book, that is primarily Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission, that's a tax, the jizya, and feel themselves subdued. So you have the idea that Muslims have to wage war against Jews and Christians until they submit and feel themselves subdued and are humbled under the rule, the hegemony of the Muslims, which according to Islamic law denies them basic rights.
Well, the Christian mentality seems to be convert or, darn, please? Give me another one. Let's have another example of violence unique to the Quran.
This, of course, is the most famous. When the sacred months are over in the pre-Islamic Arabic calendar, there were 4 sacred months when fighting was forbidden. And so the Quran says, when the sacred months have passed, then kill the mushrikun, that is those who associate partners with Allah, that is those who worship anything other than Allah, which means basically everybody else. Kill the mushrikun wherever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, lie in wait for them in each and every ambush. But if they repent and perform the prayers and give zakat, which is Islamic charity, then leave their way free. So in other words, kill them unless they convert to Islam.
Okay. Isn't there one? I remember when the Oklahoma, wherever it was, where there was the beheading that Melissa Harris Perry called workplace violence. I remember seeing a passage that said, smite ye above their necks, which was on this guy's Facebook page.
Yeah, I happen to have that one right here. Actually, he had 812 on his Facebook page. There are 2 passages, and so we can hit both real quick. The one I had is 47:4, which says, when you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks, and that's straightforward enough. And that is reinforced by 8:12, which is the one that Jakim Yisrael, the Oklahoma City beheader, had on his Facebook page, and that goes like this: when your Lord revealed to the angels, truly I am with you, so keep firm those who have believed. I will strike terror into the hearts of those who have disbelieved. Not that Islam has anything to do with terrorism, of course. So strike them at the necks and cut off their fingers.
Oh, and that's why you often see them posing like this.
No, that's actually the sign that there's only one God, that they believe in Tawheed, which is Islamic monotheism, that it's absolute monotheism, no Trinity, nothing else, only one Allah. And so they hold up their finger like that as the sign of their one allegiance to the one God.
It's funny when a Quran lists terror and clearly says attack the necks, and someone that defines himself as a terrorist and is reading the Quran chops someone at the neck. Our first reaction is, well, he must have been under a lot of stress.
Yes, he was mentally ill. There's a remarkable outbreak of mental illness all around the world today. The French, in particular, seem to have a particular tendency to ascribe all this to mental illness. And just the other day, there was a really particularly egregious case of a Muslim screaming Allahu Akbar and so on, and he stabbed a rabbi and another Jewish man. And at the trial, his lawyers were saying, oh, you got to understand, this fellow is mentally ill. And his mother actually said, he's not mentally ill. He's fine. He's been fine all his life.
She was insulted. Okay, I don't know what number we're at. I think we're up to 5 now. Can you give me another example of the Quran clearly stating, be violent?
Yeah. Chapter 2, 191 is very interesting because I mentioned the sacred months and that it was forbidden to fight during the sacred months. And this has to do with this because it says, chapter 2, 191, kill them wherever you find them and drive them out from where they drove you out. Persecution is worse than slaughter. Now you might wonder, well, what on earth does persecution is worse than slaughter mean? We go over to 217 and it says, they ask you about fighting during the sacred months. Tell them, fighting therein is a great sin, but a greater sin is to prevent mankind from following the way of Allah, to disbelieve in Him, etc., etc. Persecution is worse than slaughter. The idea is, yes, there's this rule don't fight during the sacred months. But if you're being persecuted as a Muslim, if you feel like you're under pressure or people are waging war against you or opposing you, you can kill them during the sacred month. It's okay. So enshrined is the moral principle that any moral principle can be set aside if it's for the good of Islam, and you can really break any rule and lie and cheat and steal and kill for the advancement of Islam.
That seems to come up a lot. We have these rules, but if Islam is under attack, all rules go out the garbage, including, what's that thing, tariqiyah, where you can lie if it helps jihad?
Taqiyya is it's the term that's become popularly associated with basically religious deception. Taqiyya is a particularly Shiite term. The Shiite Muslims, who are only 10 to 15% of Muslims worldwide, invented the idea, the doctrine. They have the doctrine of Taqiyya because they so often were being killed by the Sunnis. So they would pretend to be Sunni, and that was okay, and then they can save their lives. But it's actually rooted in the Quran, and so it applies not just to Shiites, but all Muslims. And it's from chapter 3, verse 28. Let not the believers take the disbelievers as awliya, which is like your wali, your liege lord, your protector, your supporter, instead of the believers. And whoever does that will never be helped by Allah in any way, unless you are doing it to guard yourselves against them. Now that clause, unless you're doing it to guard yourselves against them, that makes all the difference. The Islamic commentators on the Quran have interpreted that to mean that if you're under pressure, if you're having trouble, if you're in a desperate situation or a difficult situation with the unbelievers, then you can pretend to be their ally and lie to them. And as long as Islam is advanced, you're good.
So you could maybe pretend that you were building a clock when you knew that you were causing some panic on purpose. Okay, we won't count that as violent, though. I think we're up to 7 now. I'm not sure. Let's have another one.
I've lost track, but there's plenty of violence in the Quran. 191 we got. Let's see. 434 is a different kind of violence, and that is in a chapter called An-Nisa, which is women, and verse 34 of chapter 4 says this: men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made one superior to the other, that is, made men superior to women, and because they spend to support them from their means. Therefore, righteous women are obedient, and they guard in the husband's absence what Allah orders them to guard. And as to those women from whom you fear disobedience, give them a warning, send them to separate beds, and beat them. So it's a 3-step process. And the third is beat a woman, not who is disobedient, but from whom you fear disobedience.
Oh, wow. Just the potential chance of her getting lippy means you get to beat her up.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times Muslims try to explain that one away and say, oh no, Muhammad said he was brushing his teeth, and they came up to him and said, what should we use to beat our wives? And he held up his toothbrush, his toothstick, his miswak, and said, use this. And so they're saying, see, he's not really meaning beat your wife. It's a symbolic gesture of disapproval. But on the other hand, his favorite wife, Aisha, his famous child bride, she tells a story where he got up during the night and went out, and she was curious as to where he was going, so she followed him. And he saw that she was following him, and then she says, and he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. So clearly, it's not about not giving pain to the wife who he fears disobedience from. Muhammad did it, and because he's the supreme example of conduct, it must be right to do.
That's amazing. I mean, I just read today that the Islamic State had issued a fatwa against children with Down syndrome and had murdered 38 disabled infants. Are they going above and beyond the call of duty here, or is that in the Quran?
Well, that's actually not in the Quran, and that is a story that I have not put up at Jihad Watch as of yet because I need to track it down and haven't yet been able to. It comes from one source, an opposition group in Iraq, and it says that it's based on a fatwa. Now, I don't know of any statements of Muhammad or passages of the Quran. As a matter of fact, I know that there are not any on which such a fatwa could be based, but a fatwa is a religious decree. And so it would have to come from something Muhammad said. It may be that I think actually it's likely to be inauthentic, but it may be that they have some creative interpretation.
Yes. All right. Well, let's stick. The purpose of this is to stick to the letter of the law
Okay.
and not have any conjecture. So I think we're up to eight or so. Let's do. Give me another example of graphic violence that the Quran tells you to go and commit.
Okay. This is actually more of the dichotomy between believers and unbelievers. And so when we think about it in light of those kill the mushrikun, kill the polytheists and so on, then it takes on a different light. O you who believe, this is chapter 9, verse 123, fight those of the disbelievers who are close to you and let them find harshness in you. And juxtapose that with chapter 48, verse 29, Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another, but harsh to the disbelievers. So there's no concept of being merciful to the believers. That is just out of the question altogether. You have to be harsh with the disbelievers, and in the context of these other verses, that means fighting and killing them.
And I can't think of anything I've ever heard that's in the Bible that says anything like that. They seem to see non-believers as lost souls that need help.
Oh, speaking of lost souls, actually, Gavin, this is another interesting thing. Since you mentioned the Bible, I know that the Bible says that God desires all people to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, this is not specifically violent except on the part of Allah, but consider this in comparison to that. And if we, this is Allah speaking, if we had willed, surely we would have given every person his guidance. But the word from me took effect that I will fill hell with jinn and mankind together. Now that is unfortunately not jinn like gin and tonic, that's jinn, the spirit beings. So he's saying, Allah is saying, this is chapter 32, verse 13, I could have brought everybody to the truth, but instead I've just decided to torture some people in hell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a new one. So not only are they not lost souls who need help, I might just torture some of these lost souls on a lark.
Yeah, he made us to torture us in hell. He just gets off on that, apparently.
It's amazing. I think the problem is no one reads the Quran, so when they hear it's just a religious book just like the Bible, we take that for granted, and we don't.
Yes.
We assume there's no passages in there that are leading to this terrorism. And whether it's a combination of all these things or just these things, we at least need the Quran listed as a possible factor in all of this terrorism.
Absolutely. And people just assume that it's all full of love and benevolence because holy books generally are. And that there might be a couple of passages, like there are a couple of passages in the Bible that are problematic. They figure, well, maybe there's a here and there, some passage that people interpret in some way. It's actually not like that. I actually play a little parlor game sometimes if I have the Quran and I'm with somebody who says, oh, you're misinterpreting, you're taking it out of context, you're ignoring all the peaceful passages. I say, okay, open it up, any place, anywhere, open it up at any passage, any page that you open it to, you will find a furious denunciation of unbelievers. There is not a single page of the Quran you can open it to that will not have that.
All right, well, we did 10. Let's have you back soon, and we'll do 10,000.
Yeah, I got more, actually. There's actually one more before we go.
Okay.
They wish that you would reject faith as they have rejected faith, and thus that you would all be equal. So don't take protectors from them unless they emigrate in the way of Allah. That is, they leave their homes and go to a new land to Islamize it, like we're seeing in Europe today. But if they turn back, then seize them and kill them wherever you find them. So kill them wherever you find them is actually 3 times in the Quran. 2:191 and 9:5 that we discussed earlier, and this one, chapter 4, verse 89. And so there's quite a lot of exhortation to killing there.
So it says, if the Syrian refugees are not accepted by Germany and they come home, kill them.
No, only if they come home on purpose.
Oh, I
If
see.
They say, no, we decided not to conquer and Islamize Germany. We decided to go home and go bowling, then kill them.
Call me old-fashioned, but I like the Bible better.
Yeah, anybody would, believer and unbeliever.
Thanks for appearing on the show.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.